Smith.
Thank you very much, Chair. Well, just to thank the Minister and Tracy for their presentations here this morning. You know, for once it sounds like a really positive story and something very exciting with huge potential for our communities and for those of us living in rural Ireland. And we do always tend to, I suppose, focus on the negative, like the closure of the post offices and all that. And they do have, I suppose, a physical disadvantage. They present a physical disadvantage as we see it and as we perceive it to be. You know, we see it as another very important building, business, opportunity for footfall, an opportunity to bring people into our towns and villages gone. And I'm thinking of towns like Kinnalek and Killashandra that would have been affected by that. But then there's other small towns that probably, you know, face difficulties, but as you pointed out, Tracy, different types of difficulties. Towns like Belturbet and Bawnboy that are potentially, you know, in the realm of losing, or on the cusp of losing a secondary school in both of those towns in West Cavan, which is a really scary thing for any town or village to be facing, the potential of losing that youth, that footfall, the families that travel to those towns, and of course those children, students circulating and the staff circulating in those towns and villages at the moment. So I suppose my point really is that the presentation you bring here today is something that I feel is very positive, something I'd like to know more about, to complement the Minister, who has obviously been hugely involved in this. And you know, I'd be interested to see where your other chapters are, because I'm not aware of this. Have you a chapter in Cavan or Monaghan? They'd be my area. I think, you know, your message here today has been that there's two elements that are fundamental in the success of this, and that is community and communication. And we see it in all of our towns and villages around the country, where there's lots of voluntary groups, be it the Town Development Association, the Tidy Towns, the Community Alerts, all doing different jobs that are really important, that are the glue that keep our communities, you know, held and stuck together. And I think what you're presenting today here is an opportunity to bring all of those under the one roof, under the one umbrella, and more importantly to provide jobs in our small towns and villages. We see how, and well, I see it personally every day on the N3 travelling up and down to Dublin. We're back to commuter crisis, if you like, where so much, and commuting is what kills people and diminishes, you know, quality family life and family time, because so many hours are spent in cars. It is for us in Cavan Monaghan, because we don't have trains. That's not an option. So people are sitting in their cars for 2 and 3 hours to get to work every day, 2 and 3 hours to get home, and they're exhausted by the time they get home. And they haven't got that quality time to spend with their young children or their spouses or whomever. So I suppose really what I'm saying is I do think it's really positive. I wondered if you could maybe expand on what my colleague Deputy Anne Rabbitte raised today about in terms of funding opportunities that may be there to, I suppose, embrace all of this. Are our LEOs from our local authorities involved in what you're doing here? And I just wonder if there's been any gender breakdown in terms of the breakdown of females or males that are benefiting from this, because as I would see it, there's a huge opportunity for women in all of this. Women who have great career prospects ahead of them, but that has to be put on hold because of childcare expenses. And as we know, for most families, childcare can be as expensive and perhaps more expensive than their mortgage. Therefore, couples have to weigh up, is it sensible for both in the family to be working? So potentially women are the untapped human capital resource, human resources that can be, you know, really expanded on here, and, you know, perhaps provides a platform for women in terms of working remotely. So I just wonder, has there been any studies done? Have we any figures on that in terms of the gender breakdown of who benefits most from this? Yeah, and as I suppose, I do think you're right, Tracy, we tend to sort of jump on the bandwagon of the things that are wrong in our communities, and I think what you're presenting here today is probably an opportunity for communities to look down, and as you have quite rightly said, Minister, every town is unique in terms of what their disadvantages is, but also in terms of what their advantages is. Perhaps they're close to a motorway, perhaps they've got the school in the locality, perhaps they have a Cavan or Monaghan Institute in their town that provides the, you know, the young students coming out and you know, ordinarily would see their opportunity as having to go to Galway, having to go to Dublin, having to go to Belfast. Well, perhaps what you're presenting here today is jobs for them to tap into in their communities that will keep what is most important for our rural communities, and that is to keep people in them. So I suppose my two questions are you working with LEOs? What other funding opportunities are there for Grow Remotely to tap into? The gender breakdown, and I suppose the notion that, you know, all of this is key to this is communication, because as I said, we have lots of voluntary groups working within our communities, tend not to be maybe communicating with each other, but all with the same, you know, passion at heart to better for the betterment of their communities. And I suppose I see this as the vehicle maybe to do this through what you're suggesting. Perhaps you could expand on that.
Thanks, Deputy Smith. Deputy O'Keefe, do you want to come in there?
No, keep going.
You okay? There's a number of questions there, Minister Tracy, Paul. Could you address some of them, please?
On the chapters, and thank you for your kind words on it, you fundamentally get, I think, our bigger mission and our purpose behind it. You can see all of the chapters and locations where we are on changex.org/growremote/locations. So we're everywhere. We have one in Monaghan, and to give you an example, I was there yesterday. Tremendous local council in Monaghan, like so forward thinking. But so I sat down, and this is my first question to every community: do you know who Wayfair is? No. And I'm like, that's why the jobs aren't here. The difference between you knowing who Wayfair is and not knowing who Wayfair is the difference between whether those jobs are there or not. So Monaghan are building out a particularly ambitious kind of chapter there, and I suppose they see a great opportunity in it, just to reference that particular point. On funding, we have, like any community group, I suppose, back to the foundations of Grow Remote, they think the landscape for funding is for communities is a minefield. I've been to Brussels 3 times last year to try and understand. I've asked every county. Counties seem to do it differently between them, and so we have wherever there's a fund open, we have an application in. In terms of the LEOs, it has been, so LEOs are, everybody in fact that we've been working with has been fantastic, and locally, particularly in the likes of Tullamore, they've been great, right, and really proactive on it. But because we're a national organisation, it's hard to actually structure engagement with the LEOs without it just being one-off cases here and there. So that's one of the challenges that we have, because when we did rise, we rose nationally. So, you know, it wasn't as if we were just in Tullamore or Offaly or Galway. On female, on kind of women and that side of it, hugely important to me personally. We don't actually have any stats in it, but I'll tell you a story of one woman who was in our chapter. She is a single mother, was living in Dublin. She had to, because she was renting, had to move out. I never even occurred to me, but obviously when you have to move out, you need to move your child out of school. Huge interruption to her life. Said absolutely can't do this. Moved to a commuter town. Convinced her boss again to allow her ad hoc to work remotely, and through Grow Remote was able to get a referral into a bigger remote working company and get a proper kind of full-time remote working job. So that's the kind of stuff that we're seeing. I don't have any stats in it, but Abodu, an Irish recruitment company, are focused on kind of unconscious bias in hiring. Employ Mum are focused on taking women who have been staying at home and bringing them back into the workforce, and Work Juggle as well are focused on kind of enabling that workforce to come back. So it's a huge part of this, not a sole part, but a huge part of it. I think that I have answered all the questions there.
Thanks, Tracy.